Join us on the last bus home.
Yeah, steady. So what have you got? What have you got today?
Today, mate, we're going to be taking a little trip to the 1800s.
Ooh.
I know you like that era.
No, there's been worse times.
Yeah, definitely. So today, Mr. Wilson, we're going to look into the world of spirit photography and paranormal artists. So, spirit photography, as I said, it was seemed to come to notoriety in the late 1800s. So just to delve into a bit of it, what I've got is some notable spirit photographers, some also notable, for want of a better word, we'll call them paranormal artists, maybe a few dealings with the devils going on, sell some pieces. Going to look into as well just the kind of like debunking behind a lot of it, because I'm going to be honest, a lot of it, I think it was more the time when it was done is that people were kind of desperate. And I was kind of surprised to hear that people were even bothered about this kind of shit in the late 1800s. I kind of thought they'd have bigger fish to fry than looking at ghost pictures, but clearly not. And I think it was probably
I think the whole spiritualism movement and everything that came about, wasn't it to do with like civil war? Like
exactly,
so
spot on.
have been lost, yeah.
It was all that, and it was people, I guess, sort of like modern day, what are they called, where you get a load of people in a room and you get that dude up at the front and he pretends to talk to all your dead relatives. Not that I'm knocking that shit, but, you know, I think a fair few of them have been debunked.
Yeah, I think they're called charlatans. Like,
That might be it.
yeah.
But yeah, I'm guessing it's the same sort of thing. People getting kind of like solace in the fact that, you know, they might be seeing the dead relatives and stuff. So, like I said, it was a pretty big deal in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Seems to go on into like got some kind of stories from like the 1920s as well. So it was mainly practiced in Europe, America as well, but especially like Great Britain and France. London, Paris, America was like Boston, New York. So you kind of like your usual kind of hubs for these kind of things. So there was some kind of like key dates. There was some trials that went on, but like I said, it was all towards the late 1800s. Did actually look into some sort of cases of like the rise of like spiritualism, because again, it was kind of like new to me that spiritualism would even be a thing during that time.
Well, it was in New York, wasn't it, with the Fox sisters?
Oh, mate, you're literally in my head. I was reading that just as you were saying that. So, yeah, the Fox family. As you said, primarily the sisters, Maggie and Kate. So, basically, looking into this, as you mentioned, Rochester, New York, the homes near Hydesville. So this all started in 1848. So what happened was they started to hear noises, as you do in these kind of stories, but these noises became famous for what they were all about. They were called the Rochester Rappings. So it was around like when Maggie was 14, Kate was, let's say, 11. They started hearing all these strange noises. But the difference in this story is the sisters tried to communicate with the spirit, and this was kind of what the fame was based around. So the spirit they affectionately named Mr. Splitfoot. They believed it was the spirit of a man named Charles Rosner, who had supposedly been murdered in the house, buried in the cellar. And what they did was they came up with kind of like a system of knocks, and they linked it to like the alphabet. So there'd be so many raps for yes, so many raps for no, and then they would spell out like words, things like that. So news of them doing this got out. The older sister became a bit of a, let's say, pimp. She pimped her sisters out, claiming that there were these kind of like, you know, special girls who could talk to the other side. So she started managing basically like demonstrations they would call it, like, say, the Rochester Rappings, and people would come round, they would listen to this sort of stuff. So it was quite interesting that I had a lot of witnesses. I think one of the sisters did try and say later on that she was doing it herself, but nothing was really proven. I think the other sister kind of went against it. But it wasn't like a nice ending for him. I think looking at it, there was a lot of alcoholism. They basically both died in poverty from what I could get. And it was kind of a shame as well, because looking into it, they held pretty large seances. So the photographers were celebrities in their own right. So the main photographer that I kind of brought up when looking into this was a guy called William H. Mumler. There's a lot of stuff on this guy. So I'm not going to go like too far into it. I just want to kind of briefly run over some of the photographers. But if you're looking for spirit photography G's, William is your boy. So he was born in Massachusetts, 1830s. He was a jewelry engraver, and that was because his parents were as well. So he kind of went into that. And he went round to, I think she was a friend, just a photographer, and he was messing around in her studio. And basically, what he captured was a ghostly image of what he thought was his deceased cousin. So this was all just, like I say, he wasn't really a photographer. He was a jewelry engraver, but he was just kind of like messing around. So you kind of think, okay, well, it's a happy accident. But he got really famous from this stuff. There's actually a really cool photo of a picture he took with Abraham Lincoln's widow. And it shows Abraham Lincoln, like, pretty clearly behind him. If you want to Google that and check it out, it's quite funny. But
Yeah, I think I've seen that.
You've seen that
Wasn't
one?
this when cameras were like needing really strong, really long exposure times?
There was, yeah. And I suppose you could be like, I would think it'd be a lot harder to do stuff back in the day, whereas now obviously you've got apps and whatever, and pretty much no one can tell the difference between a fake image. I think the world of spirit photography could have only existed back in those days, but the kind of trickery used would be like what you would think, like your double exposures, smearing like the plates, things like that. A lot of it to do with the developing of the picture. But, you know, these guys got pretty famous of it. So basically, like I say, took this self-portrait, got really famous from this, and then that was his thing. So he was the spirit photographer. With the American Civil War happening, I think, like we said, that was where a lot of his sort of fame came from. And you've heard of P.T. Barnum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Famous showman. So
Yep.
he was a skeptic, and he was actually not a fan
I believe
of
he looked like Hugh Jackman. He sang like him too.
This is it.
Yeah.
So P.T. Barnum hired a photographer to create like a fake spirit photograph of himself with the spirit of Abraham Lincoln, who at the time was still alive. And that was kind of like what he said. He wanted to fake this spirit photography of a person who was still very much around. So it kind of did. And, you know, P.T. Barnum was a pretty famous dude. So I think it got out there, and it kind of like sort of went downhill as far as credibility from there. So again, if you are into Mumler, there's plenty out there to research, but there's quite a few sort of podcasts and documentaries on him, so I don't want to go too far down there. I think we have some more interesting characters as well. So, like I said, he was kind of like your main dude, but we do have a British spirit photographer called Ada Emma Dean. She went by the name of Madame Dean. Not sure if you've ever come across her before, but again, late 1800s. She was born in 1864. And again, she was a pretty prominent, what was classed as a spirit photographer. Her photographs, when I was looking through, featured like kind of like, it's like draped materials and more ethereal figures, kind of like interacting with the sitters almost. Like they showed like maybe like a figure almost kind of like bending down to kind of like,
like Egyptian sort of robed women. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, pictures are cool. That's fake or not. They're pretty banging out. So she was kind of like around the time after World War One. So in June 1920, she took a picture of, basically a photograph where an unexpected face appeared there. And that was the kind of one that sort of sparked it. photos aren't really named as such, so you'd have to kind of like research it to have a look through. But I would sort of prompt anyone to do that because the photos are kind of they're banging. They're like haunting and only done in that old school way where if you saw a picture of that now, it's, you know, what app have you used? Sort of takes the vibe out of it.
It seems pretty fortunate that spirit photographers were able to get photos of spirits where just normal photographers were just taking pictures.
You have to have the
of normal
skills, bro.
stuff.
You have to know
So,
what you're
yeah.
doing.
Do you have to be a spirit photographer to take a photo of a spirit?
Exactly. This is it. A lot of these...
Be partly dishonest. And
no, mate. You have to believe.
I struggle with it, Lee. I struggle with it.
Well, if you want to date back to the Ghost Cop episode where our boy Ralph talked a lot about the spiritual realm, I think these photographers were also part of that crowd, if you catch my drift. So, you know, you've got to be in it to win it.
Touched. You mean?
Touched.
They'd been touched. You know, they had the gift.
This is it.
Okay. All right, I'll take that.
So moving over to France, and I'm going to absolutely destroy this name. Edouard Isidore Bourgeois, I'm going to say. That sounded pretty good. So this guy, let's just go with Bourgeois.
Eddie Bouge.
Eddie Bouge. Eddie Bouge. That's easy to say. Now let's go Eddie Bouge. Eddie Boy was in France during the late 1870s, again, all around this time, so they probably formed this nice little niche. I can imagine if WhatsApp was a thing, they'd have a group, but it wasn't, so they don't. Eddie, his spirit photographs were quite elaborate if you look at some of them, pretty much often showing like full-bodied, pretty solid apparitions. There was no, you know, double exposures on these ones, so kind of thinking, what's going on, Eddie? Again, unlike a lot of the earlier spirit photographers where it's all like kind of faint sort of stuff, Eddie's work, there was just maybe something about it, which is probably why he got a little bit more famous. So he gained a pretty significant following among the spiritualists in France. And they even offered, you know, to support him with like a studio. So he was clearly well liked. I'm gonna throw a bomb on this one though, mate, because he was exposed as a fraud. No one saw that coming, did they? So 1875, Eddie was a fraud, mate. Sorry to break that to you, but yeah, he wasn't capturing pictures.
I'm just having a look at some of his photos now, and
they're cool, right?
Yeah, I agree with the. Well, there's a picture of him. There's a self-portrait of him levitating a chair. So.
Oof. Good job he caught that on camera, because no one would believe that shit.
Exactly.
Well, I'll tell you who didn't believe it was the police. Because in Paris, they conducted a sting operation on Eddie. How bad is that, man?
Dear.
Poor old Eddie.
For what? For just faking ghost photos?
Yeah, well, I'm guessing at the time he was taking money. So, you know, our boy Eddie was a bit of a bad lad. Police discovered that his photographic plates had pre-exposed images on him. So that's how he did it, mate. I know you was looking at that photo thinking, holy shit, I'm seeing a ghost, but trickery, bud. Hate to break that to you.
Still going to keep me up tonight.
Well, after being caught, Eddie confessed in court that his photographs were fraudulent. He explained that he even used his assistants dressed as ghosts to create the pictures. So what can you do? And this was to show kind of how big it was. This was kind of like a sensational trial that happened.
Dressed as ghosts. So
yeah, man.
Can we just explore that? What's dressed as a ghost? Isn't a ghost just a person? Or did they just get all wrapped up in the blankets and stuff?
They're going to have rags on, mate. You try and spend a day in the spiritual realm and keep your clothes clean. Don't happen. That's
so
why
they have the bandage around the jaw all tied up above the head, like Marley.
That's it, mate.
And
that's it.
Chains. Right.
That's how you know it's a ghost.
That's what dressing as a ghost is. Putting a dressing gown on.
This is it, mate. This is it.
Okay.
But that's what he did. So I don't know if he...
I suppose like now you put a black wig on, pull it over your face and wear a white long white nightie.
This is it. It's all about what decade you're in. Do you know what I mean? If it was 80s, you'd probably have your
Whatever
clothes off and
trendy
be
ghost looked
dancing.
like at that time, yeah.
This is it, man. So spiritual realm kind of like evolves with the natural world. So I have no idea what it looks like in 2025. Probably scary shit, but
Oh, God, ghosts. Well, in the future, ghosts from 2025, they're going to have
hoverboards.
blue hair, septum piercings, fringes. Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, mate, Eddie, even after his career, he still lived on. So he changed his title to this word, prestigi, basically a conjurer photographer. Okay, so he continued to produce spirit photographs, but they were now pretty much understood as intentional hoaxes. So he just basically said to everyone, yeah, I was taking your money, I lied, but photos are still cool, so
But I'm going to keep doing it.
I'm going to keep on doing it. And that's why Eddie is a real ass dude. So that was the French sector. Bringing it back to British, we've got a nice little club here. So William Hope was part of the Crew Circle. So William Hope himself, again, just a standalone spirit photographer, he lived from 1863 to 1933, so that basically the prime time of spirit photography. So as a young dude, he was a carpenter. And basically his interest in spirit photography began around early 1900s, where he claimed to have captured a ghostly image while photographing a friend. So that basically led him to become, again, involved in the spiritualist movement, which, as we've discussed, was pretty banging at the time.
It was the thing to do.
It was, mate, it was. And why not? Let's hope it has a resurgence. But William Hope, he was, like I say, he was a prominent figure. Not as much as Mumla, but, he was up there. And as I mentioned, the Crew Circle, which basically described themselves as a group of spirit photographers. So you imagine that's a badass crew walking around town, clicking away.
Is there a collective noun for these people?
We can make one up. What would be a good group of spirit photographers? I'm going more of like a coven or a cackle, but I think they're kind of taken.
Oh, okay.
Oh, a clicker. Maybe.
Or a bollocks.
That's up for you, Dave.
A bollocks of spirit photographers, yeah. That's what I'm going with.
Well, I've got a guy coming up for you who you're going to really like.
Right there.
So again, gained notoriety with being in these kind of like circles. It was debunked by a guy you're going to like. You heard of Harry Price?
Absolutely. Ironically, Harry Price was also debunked, but that's another bus home.
You got to debunk the debunker. But yeah, let's look into the Crew Circle because they seem pretty cool. I try to get some more information on them. When I read these things, I'm always like hoping that they're going to be how I picture them in my head straight away. I was kind of thinking like the Lost Boys of England, like they all had leather jackets, but maybe not in that time.
Dressed like 19th century gator men.
Yeah, or maybe even more Santa Carla vampires, but who knows? So the Crew Circle. Again, not quite what I was hoping for. Not such a bunch of badasses, but they were led by William. They produced quite a lot of spirit photographs. Again, these are open for your interpretation. But they typically showed a living person with, a blurry image, translucent, that type of thing. And they always claimed it to be the relative of the person in the photograph who had passed away.
They managed to get hold of the family member.
This is it. And I think this is part of the shill. If someone says, it's your family member, they're going to be like, sweet. Where if you're like, yes, some random weirdo behind you from the spirit realm, you're not going to be quite as bothered about it, I don't think. Yeah. We had some famous believers and prominent supporters of the Crew Circle. Don't know if you've ever heard of him, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the boy.
Yes, the man who was suckered by cutouts of fairies.
That's the guy. Well, he liked the
Yeah.
Crew Circle. Who would have believed? He was also a strong believer in spiritualism. So don't knock him, man. It's part of his job.
Well, he created Sherlock Holmes, so I'm assuming that he too was a smackhead.
You never know, or maybe the spirit realm was, letting him know. We do have some accounts of artists actually using the spirit realm to maybe further their endeavours. So we'll get onto that. But Harry Price had an investigation in 1922. He's a well-known, I know you said you know a little bit about him, but we'll go into it, a well-known paranormal researcher at the British College of Psychic Science in London. So Price...
He set out to kind of like Taps in Ghost Hunters on telly. He set out to debunk it.
Right,
and if they can't debunk it, it must be real.
Kind of a good theory.
They set out to find the answers, and if they can't find the answers, they say, yeah, it could be a ghost. That was pretty much what Harry Price did for a while.
That's kind of cool. Whatever happened to Taps? I remember that. They're still about.
Taps, I don't know. They just fizzled out.
I used to enjoy that. It was good. That's what we need now. We need someone to go around debunking. And if they can't debunk, then it's...
I'm trying, but we haven't got the listeners, Lee. No, we do. We need more real cryptids and less fake ghosts.
Yes, mate. We need Harry Price of the day anyway. But basically, his team set up controlled conditions and secretly marked plates, and the plates are the things where they, develop the photographs on. So during a sitting with Hope, that's William, Price found evidence that Hope was swapping his own pre-prepared plates. Say, cheeky bastard, fooling all these people. And the plates, obviously, they had spirits already on them, mate. So what can you do? So it clearly demonstrated that the spirits were not there. So that was pretty much Price's kind of like got your moment. So despite being exposed, going back to William Hope, he continued to practice spirit photography, just like Eddie Boy. So not a lot really came back on these people.
You can't keep these spirit photographers down, can you?
No. And in fact, Arthur Conan Doyle basically continued to sort of defend his work pretty much to his death. He's a big fan of William, even after Price's debunking. But what can you do?
Sounds more like a groupie than a fan.
Yes. Yeah.
Getting passed around the spirit photographer tour bus.
Ah, can you imagine?
I'll try not to. But yeah.
That brings a whole new meaning to Bang Boss, doesn't it? But anyway, so it was an English priest and medium of a guy called William Stainton Moses. I'm sure you ever heard of this boy. So he's one of the early investigators of spirit images. There was a ghost club back in this day, founded in 1862, and chairman Alan Murdy. Basically, he went on to say, by 1875, William Stainton Moses had examined over 600 alleged spirit photographs, and it was, in his view, that no more than a dozen of them passed as something supernatural. But, mate, there is that dozen, so don't lose faith. But yeah, basically, it seems to be a lot of people were looking into this and debunking. A lot of names were popping up. They were not popular people as any kind of, like, as you put it, charlatans would be. People are always out there to expose, but I'm still going on those 12 pictures that were something. Let's say that. We'll go over some of the more famous photographs as well. So any fans of the Usborne books who know sitting there for hours as a child looking over the same pictures, you kind of grow a bit of an attachment to them, as you do well know.
Yep.
So we'll just look into this. So by this time, obviously, anyone could pick up a camera and get these. So a lot of these pictures were kind of coming to the forefront, not just by spirit photographers. A person called Cybele Corbett was taking a photograph of the library at Combermere Abbey in Cheshire. Ringing a bell? So sat in the
Is it
chair.
Sybil?
Yes.
Corbett, do you
Sybil
reckon?
Corbett. Sat in the chair, in the foreground of the shot is a faint outline of a man's head, collar, and right arm. So I do remember this photo. Not sure if this one was in the Usborne, but it's kind of a famous photo. But it's basically said to be the ghost of Lord Combermere, who had recently died in a riding accident and who was buried at the time the picture was taken. The photographic exposure took an hour, leading to many skeptics again suggesting that it had been kind of tampered with, but kind of stands up there as one of the main sort of like ghostly photos as you look into it. So yeah, you can have a look into that one. But that was just a little
Yes,
example.
this one. Yeah, it was in the Usborne book.
It was.
In the Usborne book,
Thought so.
yes. Yeah.
Thought so.
Man sat in the throne sort of chair.
Yes. Yeah. That's the one. But yeah, a lot of these photos sort of came up, and I kind of like thought, where have I seen that before? And I think they were kind of like just the standard cool paranormal pics of our time. But another case, a little bit later, this was in Norfolk, 1936. Again, Price looked into this one, but this was one of his more kind of like baffling cases. Two men from Country Life magazine were pictured standing at the bottom of a grand staircase in, I believe we discussed this last time, Raynham Hall.
Raynham Hall, yeah.
Raynham
the Brown
Hall.
Lady.
Yes, there you go.
Yes.
So it was a photographer, Captain Hubert Provand, and his assistant, Indri Shearer. Had been about to take a snap of the main staircase, and that's when they caught this, like, I remember from memory says, like a vapory kind of like figure headed down the stairs, like towards them. So the image was published by Country Life and dubbed the Brown Lady. Some believed it was the figure of Lady Dorothy Townsend, who was said to have haunted the hall since a mysterious death in 1726. So Price was of the opinion that the photograph evidence was untampered. That was his kind of like, general outlook of it all. He went on to say, I will say at once I was impressed. I was told a perfectly simple story. Mr. Indri Shearer saw the apparition descending the stairs, and at the precise moment when the Captain Provolant's head was under the black cloth. A shout, and the cap was off, the flashbulb fired, with the results which we now see. I could not shake their story. I had no right to disbelieve them. Only collusion between the two men would account for the ghost if it was fake. The negative is entirely innocent of any faking. So this was a bit of a bit of a baffling case for him. He kind of went on to say that it could have been simply a case of the camera being shaken during the 6-second exposure, but he couldn't outright prove this like with a lot of his other cases. A lot of others were much less confident than him. The Society for Physical Research concluded that it was simply because the camera had been shaken, but other people said, nah, this is the real deal. So, as discussed earlier, a lot of these kind of things were down to trickery, apart from maybe the odd few cases. A lot of it was the double exposure method. Pretty common technique, I think used a lot in that kind of field where you want to get like a bit of a ghostly image in the background. Pre-prepared negatives, that type of thing, you're always going to get something that could be easily done. Which is why it's pretty, I think, widely debunked. Hidden assistance in the case of Eddie Boy. If you can't be arsed with all that messing around in the developing room, you just shout your boy over, dress him up as a ghost.
Pay a kid, yeah.
Get on it. There you go. A lot of glass plate manipulation. So scratches you can put on the glass plate that, again, it'll resemble ghostly figures. All darkroom manipulation techniques. So what I want to move on to now is something that I used to always think was just cool as fuck. I think it was made famous not made famous, but certainly brought into contemporary society with, do you remember Haunting in Connecticut, the film?
Mm-hmm.
Where the kid opens his mouth and the ectoplasm comes out. So that wasn't that director making some cool shit. That was kind of like an old technique, shall we say. Ectoplasm leaving the bodies of mediums during seances. again, look at the time period of when this came to be, the late 1800s, early 1900s. I think the spiritualist movement has a lot to do with a lot of the shenanigans going on around this brief 50-year period. So this was, again, the peak of spirit photography and also the height of the ectoplasm craze. So, in the world of spiritualism back in the late...
Sales of white handkerchiefs went up.
Yeah. Well, people believed that spirits could communicate with the living through mediums, okay? So some mediums claimed that they went into a trance-like state and a mysterious substance called ectoplasm would emerge from the bodies. The ectoplasm was said to be a kind of physical energy or material, manifesting itself into the normal realm.
Into unconscious women. Yeah, is that what he was telling them?
Mate, it's not that kind of ectoplasm, but
I don't know. It just seems...
I think this is
mostly women in the pictures who are clearly passed out with dribbling out what can only be described as egg white.
What?
So, yeah, it just seems quite sinister to me.
Well, you might be fooled because I don't think there's any egg white going on here, mate. This
Really?
might become some kind of spiritual shit, but maybe not. People describe the ectoplasm in different ways. Sometimes it was a gooey white substance, as you just mentioned, but quite often it was described as a fine mist or fabric, which would extend high up. So this was kind of like the main, I don't know, defense against the debunking of it. How can something do that? But they found ways. So
maybe cigar smoke or...
Well, she would have to inhale on a big fat stogie before, mate. You got to remember this.
Exactly,
Is a room of
and
people.
then dribble it.
Oh, dear. But yeah, so this would come out the medium's nose, mouth, or other body parts. Hey, imagine how strange that would be. So the spirit photographers claimed that their cameras...
the cream pie, yeah.
Yeah, this is it, the money shot. It's just the 1800 money shot, mate. But so the spirit photographers are straight on this. They were like, "Hey, this is move aside, mediums, because this is our world. We'll be taking pictures of this." So they were all about this. They were all about capturing this
spiritual
new craze.
Hub. I think you can find it on.
But again, sort of, kind of, preying on people who had lost their loved ones and things like that. It basically got put down to, pretty gross trickery. How did they do it? So one of the methods they used was to swallow pieces of cloth, like cheesecloth, hessian, things like that, which would really fuck you up if...
That's thick stuff. It's not fine or
swallowed a lot of that. It won't go down for you very well. And they used to do this before the seance as well, and basically just, regurgitate it slowly during the performance, which would bring up all the crap and bile of your stomach, and it would basically look like this creature was leaving your mouth. But people were all over it because it's something you've never seen before. So they're like, yeah, it's ectoplasm. You heard the guy. That's what they said.
It's weird that it was so popular for 50 years and not a single sample could be took.
Well, this is it, mate. This is it. I reckon they were pretty quick to protect what they were doing. So some people will sort of...
Stop Mr. Price standing up with his tweezers and just getting a little bit and then just putting it in his breast pocket.
Mate, you can't stop Pricey Boy. He was all over that shit. If he was alive to this day, he'd have a basement full of jars full of ectoplasm. Guaranteed.
Just loads of stiff sports socks lined up in his office.
The way we collect ectoplasm in the 20s. The 2020s, that be.
Yeah. Not sports socks, maybe fox hunting socks. Or whatever.
This is it. Discarded in a field somewhere.
Not discarded. Curated.
So even though there was a bit of a downfall to this craze, as I said, it started to get debunked. A lot of people were kind of like pretty into this. Even the exposure of the hoaxes led to the decline in the popularity of spirit photography and, the physical mediumship basically involving the ectoplasm. A lot of people still kind of like took it to heart and that they believed things were real, but I think on the whole, it kind of got debunked. So anyway, that's a little bit about spirit photography, but we're going to go into some examples of some cool photographs. So as we previously discussed, the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall. Don't know if you ever heard of the Amityville ghost photo from 1976.
Is that the little boy on the landing?
Well, guess who it was taken by? Your favourite ghost hunters. Ed and Lorraine Warren. Okay, so they took the picture, mate, in a house where terrible shit happened.
It's a scary photo. It's one that still bothers me today. I'll give him that.
It is the boy, so you're right. And it's
his eyes.
Fucking terrifying.
Horrible, sinister.
Yeah, no shit. Well, according to them, they set up the camera that took infrared photos overnight. So one of the pictures caught the ghost boy, as you said, with the glowing eyes. So some people believe it's the ghost of one of the children who was killed in the house. But others think it could have been a reflection or even a living person, maybe Ed and Lorraine.
It was Ed.
maybe they're doing the old Eddie method and they got one of their assistants to kind of walk through. They'd have to be using child labour, but still, you never know. But do you know what, mate? As you said, it's a banging photo. Who gives a shit?
It's pretty scary.
Do you know what I mean? We don't judge them too harshly. Well,
no. You're going to separate the artist from the art.
Mate. So in 1966, another banging photo, the Tulip Staircase Ghost.
Got the hands on the banister.
So
it's sort of
it's
like
a ghost climbing the stairs, basically.
Looks like they're dabbing.
Yeah, I think that's the one. So it was a retired clergyman took the photo. It was like a spiral staircase, and it's in a museum in England. Yeah,
it's like someone's running up the stairs, or they're dabbing on the stairs. Yeah,
that's it, mate. So the ghost looks like it's kind of climbing the stairs. Experts who looked at the photo couldn't find any signs that it had been faked. So this one is still kind of up there as like pretty cool,
it's
but it's a good one. That one wasn't Usborne, was it? When I was looking at this one, I've seen it.
I think there's a drawing of it. I think there's like one of those watercolors or drawing sketches of it in the book.
Ah, nice. But yeah, that was a kind of a cool one. The Freddie Jackson Ghost in 1919. I don't know if you've come across this, but this was it's a group photo of a Royal Air Force squadron. I'm sure you've seen this one, taken after World War One. And in the background, you can see like the blurry face. I just remember the face, but it's supposed to be like one of the airmen.
Yes, right in the back corner.
Yeah. So a mechanic basically had died in an accident just 2 days before. That's what they referred to as Freddie Jackson. So it looked exactly like him. His funeral had even happened on the same day the picture was snapped. People who knew him were convinced that it was his ghost when they saw the picture. Again, not a lot of debunking into that one, so that's kind of cool. And the fact that it was a group photo taken by professional Air Force photographer. Bringing it right up to 2015. This is kind of cool. If you Google this picture, if you like. So in February 2015 at Hampton Court Palace in London, there's a 12-year-old girl. Have you seen that one? Basically,
the Hampton Court footage.
Yeah, man, I love that shit. I saw it, and I was like, "That's a ghost."
I was so excited for it. I had such high hopes for it, and it was just.
You're not telling me you're excited about that photo?
No, what with the fire doors?
It's basically you see I think there's like a girl from the side running somewhere, but then behind her it looks like a load of like ragged material just draped, but it's too thin almost to be a person. But when the picture was taken again, because I think she took a few photos, it completely disappeared. So it has to be some kind of like damage on the lens maybe or something like that. But it's kind of like in focus and it looks really cool. I liked it anyway.
What were we saying? 2015?
2015, if you type in Holly, Hampshire,
Right. So, sorry, I was thinking of 2003.
Yeah, no, this is a bit later, mate. But this is kind of a cool one. It was taken on an iPhone, which is a shit thing, but it was a cousin who took these pictures on her iPhone of this girl, and as the girl was walking, this thing just appears behind. But then as she takes more pictures, this thing just completely disappears. But it doesn't look like a smudge. It's kind of cool. But when she was basically going through the photos the next day, she kind of saw this. It was like, this tall, grey, cloaked. They're saying it was a woman. But
It looks like dreadlocks.
Yeah, almost. It looks kind of crazy, but it's kind of a cool photo. I liked it.
Yeah, it is. And looking at it, let's say it's real. That's terrifying.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That tall.
Yeah. And how it kind of lurches over her.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty terrifying. So that brings us to the end of the photography portion. And I just want to kind of like bring this to a close with a few little mentions from some paranormal artists, because these were kind of cool. And these aren't people, again, who are like, I'm painting a picture of a ghost. Because you'd be like, wait, you got the ghost to stand there while you painted that picture? That's pretty impressive. This is more like, maybe they're maybe taking some kind of prompts from the spiritual realm. So my first paranormal artist is a lady called Georgiana Horton. She lived a long time ago, 1814. Lived all the way up to 1884. So she kind of passed away at kind of like the height of the spirit photography craze. So she was born in Las Palmas in the Canary Islands in 1814. So probably didn't have anything to do with like the scenes in, New York and like London and all that kind of stuff. So she was the seventh of 12 children. So even though her father was like I think he's a booze salesman, wine and brandy merchant. So she wasn't poor, but with that many kids, she wasn't getting the latest pair of like Nike Air Max or anything. She was young. Her family moved to London. So England, which was where she spent most of her life. So again, I think she probably dodged all that kind of thing when she was super, super young. So she was quite independent, said she had a strong will, showed an interest in art. It was mainly like drawing flowers and plants, but this took a significant turn when she became deeply involved in spiritualism. So it wasn't kind of a sudden thing. It really developed over time, and the death of her sister, Mary Ann, in 1851, followed by other losses, kind of like connected to her a bit more of the spiritual realm, and she felt spiritualism offered like connection to like these family members. She wrote a book as well called Chronicles of the Photographs of Spiritual Beings and Phenomena Invisible to the Material Eye. Quite a few interesting excerpts into there. But I was looking at some of her pictures and they're cool, man. Watercolours, really like vibrant, swelling colours. She seemed to claim that she took instruction again from kind of the spirit world she called them like the spirit guides. And she attributed each painting to specific spirits who claimed to guide her hand. So it was like she wasn't painting, she would maybe go off into this kind of almost trance and let her hand met the movement, and she would create these. They're really cool, man. I would definitely
like automatic writing.
Yeah, pretty much like that, but instead like banging paintings. So it included like figures like the Eye of God, various archangels, and even deceased artists. But it was something that she said she didn't know previously, and before she knew it, she'd painted this picture of one of these things. Pictures they look cool, they're like energetic, and it's like a lot of movement. So I kind of like sort of picture her doing that, where it's a lot of swirling going on, but kind of creates these really cool, cool pictures, not just random, let's say, modern art. But challenging her contemporaries, when she exhibited his work in 1871, they were met with pretty much a lot of ridicule and confusion. I don't think people kind of got it back in the day. And people, again, just hadn't seen anything like that before. So she was kind of a visionary and that sort of thing. In essence, for basically a paranormal beliefs just weren't a fleeting interest. It was like a life. And this basically went into the artistic practice. But she got quite famous, and a lot of people saw her work as like groundbreaking, definitely, like I say, unconventional, and a lot of this didn't go down too well with the Victorian crowd. But yeah, she's kind of cool. So I would definitely encourage anyone to look at those pieces. Another artist, which I thought was kind of cool, maybe a little bit more darker. I'm going to mess up this name. Hilma af Klint, Swedish artist. Again, pretty much in the prime spiritual awakening of 1862 to 1944. She actually was involved in a group called The Five. So The Five in Swedish means Dafem. Defem. So they started in 1896, and they were all really into spiritualism and the paranormal. They would have regular seances where they would try and communicate with the spirits and create art from these seances, basically. So there were contact beings called the High Masters, who they thought had special knowledge about the universe. So that's kind of cool. Maybe going off into some weird kind of like trance and speaking to the DMT elves, maybe. So the Five would go into like a trance state, and they would do things like, as you mentioned, automatic writing and automatic drawing. So this meant they just basically let the hands do the movement while they were all tripping out. But it was kind of a cool scene. And they thought the 60s were wild. Go into the late 1800s, bro. You see all these people tripping out in rooms doing fucking spirit writing and spirit painting. It was a wild time. Oddly enough, though, no mention of any intoxicants. You know, like, what was it, like laudanum back in the day?
It was laudanum. It wasn't really seen as a recreational drug. It was just normal.
Yeah, true. But I suppose, I don't know if it was amongst the high class, because a lot of these people were, well, not like poor, but they didn't all come from massive amounts of money. So I don't know how.
Well, they could afford paper and pens.
Yeah, true, mate, true. But how much was a tub of laudanum back in the day, or a bottle of the old synth? Hilma af Klint was key part of the Five. She was often the one who would channel the messages from the High Masters through their drawings. That's cool, man. They should make a film on this lady. So the early drawings are quite different from basically a later paintings, which are described as more abstract, but they helped her to develop like basically this notoriety in like spirit paintings. So as I mentioned, they basically went off the guidance of these High Masters as a tool. A lot of the paintings had symbols, so a bit different, from the previous artists we spoke about. They had like letters, words, deep spiritual meanings. So they were a lot more, symbolic. And like I say, these were the connections between what they said was the physical and the spiritual world. So I don't know if the symbols and things were like meanings and explanations on how to maybe enter those worlds, but they just said it had the link. So she was fascinated by trying to depict things that you basically couldn't see, like spiritual energies. So again, a lot of this was put into the art with kind of like the symbolism behind it. Again, a lot of people would just kind of view this as abstract nonsense, but once you looked into it a bit more and you saw the kind of meanings behind it. The Temple Commission. So the High Masters basically gave Hilma af Klint a kind of special task to create a series of paintings. Okay, so again, the High Masters, these are these entities in the spiritual realm. And what they did was they got in touch with Hilma, as you do, maybe on the odd blower, and told her to create a painting for a future temple. So this temple was meant to be a place where people could experience spiritual enlightenment through her art. It's kind of a bit of a self-indulgent message from the High Masters, but hey, love, your art's amazing. I want you to do a gallery showing, basically, and yeah, cool. But it was a big project.
Yeah, she must have got wind that she were dropping off and people were losing interest, so she just made sure she got herself a little contract out of it and commissioned herself some more paintings.
Well, mate, that's what the skeptics out there would think, but I'm all about these High Masters. So this project... This project included 193 paintings, mate. So one a small task, and that basically just she became obsessed with that for many years to come. So that was Hilma kind of a cool broad, and I just like the gang she was in. Maybe they could meet up with that gang of spirit photographers, the Crew Circle. Meet up with the five, and I don't know, do a music video or something.
Become the 11.
So a few just mentions on some paranormal artists. I'm just going to drop a guess who this is now, mate, just to kind of close up. So I want to go through one of probably the most, I would say, visually famous paranormal paintings of all time. This person was basically trapped in this painting, they were said to. There wasn't a very nice person. The person acts like a prison. No? Good guess, though. But what they basically said was this portrait of this evil person was painted, and it became a prison for the person to just try and keep them in there. This guy was a ruler back in the day.
Not the Scourge of Moldova. Vigo, is it, from Ghostbusters 2?
Do you mean the Scourge of Carpathia, the Sorrow of Moldova?
Yeah.
You are fucking bang on, my boy. Bang on. So the painting acted as a prison for Vigo's evil spirit. However, the negative energy in New York and all the bad feelings made him stronger, allowing him to break free.
A river of slime.
Hell yeah. And all he needed was the body.
Slime, which was a really cheerful pink.
It was. And it made you, didn't it just make you want to jump into that shit?
It made me hungry, yeah. It was like Angel Delight or something.
Well, if you remember the film, they made that into Pure Love when they played some badass 80s tunes to it. Do you not remember?
Yeah.
It made the toaster go from spazzing out to being all lovely. Because they're Ghostbusters, mate. Do what they want. I bet Harry Price couldn't debunk those.
No, of course not. That was found footage.
That's it. So yes, mate. So that brings me to the end of this trip, looking through some spooky photographs and some scary art. I'm not going to ask you what your thoughts are, because I know you're going to go full Dana Scully on me and say it was all a load of BS. But you know what, mate? I'm still hanging on to those few photos that even Harry couldn't explain.
Yeah, well, Harry's going to have his own bus home, because that man's a tale in his own time. I'm a bit heartbroken you haven't covered the downfall of spiritualism, which was pretty much brought about by Mr. Harry Houdini himself.
Well, you say downfall, I just say downtime. I think it's coming back, mate.
Oh, okay. Well, you see, Harry Houdini and his wife, I can't remember her name, Mrs. Houdini. I think she was called Bess. But they had some kind of pact where they would communicate. One would communicate with the other if one were to die. And they were both into the seances and the spiritualism and all that. She died. Harry was distraught. And she never got back to him. She never contacted him. So he got a proper hump on about it, and then just set about just debunking all the mediums he could find.
Man.
He made it his life's goal in later years to just bring down mediums.
He got butthurt. And
he did.
Went after the mediums.
And exposed them.
That's fair, mate. I'm all about exposing the mediums.
Harry Houdini and Harry Price could have made quite the dynamic duo. And they wouldn't call themselves the Five, they just call themselves the Harrys. And
two Harrys.
Just go around harrying people. Yeah.
Fair play, mate. I think there's too many of those people about now. Too many debunkers. Too many naysayers.
Not these days, mate. We need more with AI. Telling you.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's just the lack of a good, credible naysayer. Do you know what I mean?
I think technology has just took all the fun out of it.
It has. And that's like I said, you wouldn't catch spirit photography ever making a resurgence post-digital camera. Just it's not going to happen, is it?
Now,
Well,
the next step is actual evidence of a ghost walking into the room of 100,000 people and saying, "Hey, I'm here,"
this is
and
it, man.
fading out.
But I think from that journey, we're going to collect another traveller. I've noticed from past journeys, we seem to be gathering a few more people who just don't want to leave the bus. Hans Assmann being one of them.
Hans Assmann,
just chilling out with the Bigfoot and grey alien upstairs. But do you know what? I think Eddie Boy deserves a seat on the bus just for blatant. Do you know what I mean? The fact that the fact that he got called out and he was like, do you know what? I don't really give a fuck. I'm going to still keep doing my photographs and hand them out.
and failing and then going again for a third time.
This is it. You can't knock that will. Do you know what I mean? So, do you know what, Eddie? You get a free bus pass from me. How about that? Day rider. Free day rider. There you go.
His Oyster card.
He gets an Oyster card. Whereas Hans Assmann gets a goddamn yearly pass.
He's the conductor.
Yeah, man. He's good.
Yeah.
Good boy. Cool, mates.
Fair enough.
Well, that brings us to the end. So I hope you found that slightly informative and you're not going to be taking up any photography anytime soon.
Thrillingly, and thank you. No, I won't be.